In this video, we're gonna get the perfect guard fit on our XCAL fighter and begin working on the carbon fiber handle. The blade is ready to go. It's time to move our attention to the tang and make it so the guard can fit up to the blade properly. I cover the face of the file guide with Sharpie so I can see easily when my mill bit hits the file guide. I chuck the blade and file guide assembly up in the milling machine and start milling the shoulders on the tang. This is the area the guard will fit up to the Ricasso in. I mill 2 stair steps into the tang that are only a couple thousandths of an inch each. I have an extra large work rest that kind of wraps around my grinder, but I want it to wrap around even further so I can grind on my blade with the file guide assembly attached to it without it kind of hanging off the normal work rest. You can see that extra wide work rest coming in handy here as the file guide is just barely able to stay on it and hold everything square as I grind on the tang. I was running into some clearance issues for grinding on the very end of the tang, so this was the perfect opportunity to unbox my brand new Morocco platen by Bladesmith. What's cool about that is it'll give you more clearance on the left side of your sanding belt for when you're shaping handles and wrapping things around the platen and grinding on the ends of tangs and stuff like that you want to do over on the left side of the grinder. Now you'll have a lot more freedom to do that. We milled that small area right where the guard is gonna go, but in order to thin down the rest of the tang, I'm gonna use the surface grinder. I've already got the blade on here, popped down with the electromagnet. I'm gonna get grinding on this and stop talking now. I use a slack belt on the Bladesmith to give the top and bottom of the tang a nice little dome. This is going to be the kind of takedown knife that the customer can take apart, and I think it'll just look a little nicer having that domed tang.
And now, a word from our sponsor, Knifemaker Plus.
My family and I are so excited. A brand new Knifemaker Plus exclusive build has just begun. We'll be making a massive folder named Enigma. Members of Knifemaker Plus will go alongside me as we set off on an epic journey of creation together. I'll be teaching what I know, discovering new things as we go, and finishing with one of the coolest knives I've ever attempted to create. I don't want you to miss out on your chance to be part of the story as we bring Enigma into existence one piece at a time. Oh yeah, did I mention we're gonna make some sweet feather Damascus for this folder? Well, we are. Feather Damascus, carbon fiber, titanium, gun-blued steel, gold inlay, bearings, pivots, and screws will all be married together in the union of the ages. Enrollment is officially open. The link's in the description. The Enigma folder, only on Knifemaker Plus. Got the tang cleaned up nicely. It's in a 220 grit finish on the sides and have the top and bottom cleaned up as well. The next thing we need to do is fit our guard. I think we've got a piece of metal that's plenty big, so we should be able to work with this no problem. We're gonna be making a pretty thick guard at about a 1/2 inch thick. I don't have any 1/2 inch thick metal, so we're just gonna use this 1 inch thick metal and cut it 1/2 inch long. And then I'll start grinding and milling and processing this down into a piece we can make our guard out of. There was one thing I forgot I needed to do before we actually finished fitting the guard on, and that was to hand sand the Ricasso up to 1500 grit. Our guard fits all the way up to there, about 1/8 of an inch away. Hopefully that'll be just about right. I ended up using a 3/16 mill bit to cut away most of the material, and then I got the radius on the corners a little smaller using an 1/8 inch bit. I put a bunch of layers of duct tape around the blade, and that'll allow me to clamp it very, very tightly in the vise. Then I can put the guard on and use a special punch that goes around the tang and drive the guard on with a hammer. We're gonna drive it on, and then we'll remove some material with a file and keep driving it on over and over again until the Ricasso leaves a mark around on the guard. I slowly filed some material and kept hammering the guard on until the Ricasso got really close to touching the guard. And then I put some Sharpie on here and scribed a light line to outline the Ricasso. Now I'm gonna go in with a 3/32 inch mill bit and recess that entire area where the Ricasso is gonna touch. I'm gonna lower it down about 10/1000ths of an inch. I normally eyeball how close I get the mill bit to my scribe line. This time though, I utilized the DRO a little bit, and you can kind of see the difference here. I eyeballed how close I got my mill bit to the end line. You can see how much material's left there. And then I used the DRO to get really close to the scribe line on the sides, and that's actually pretty cool. I just cut away some material with the high-speed dental burr at my engraving station and then hammered the guard back on there. The Ricasso left a little bit more of an outline on the guard. I'm gonna keep going back between the dental burr and hammering on the guard over and over again until the Ricasso touches the bottom of that slot we milled. Once that's done, our guard should fit over the Ricasso about 10/1000ths of an inch. I messed with fitting the guard for quite a while and finally got it to a place I'm happy with. You still have to lightly tap it in place. You can't quite push it on by hand. And in order to take it off, you have to lightly tap on the end of the tang. Only like once though. And then it pops off. I believe it's gonna be about perfect though. By the time we finish the blade and do the etching on the blade and the tang will get etched and stuff, I think the material will all be a little bit smaller, and this should fit on by hand. The reason I need the guard to fit on by hand is because this is gonna be the kind of takedown where the customer is actually encouraged to take the entire knife apart and put it back together. We're gonna make a cool takedown tool and everything for it. Normally though, I have my guards fit tight enough to where I have to hammer them in place every time and have to lightly hammer them to get them off. But this one needs to actually be able to come off and on without using any extra tools, because you probably don't wanna have your customer get this nice knife and then make them go buy an anvil and a hammer and have to bang on the knife to get the guard off. Now that the guard is fit, the next thing to work on is the handle. Instead of just using a solid piece of carbon fiber, I've actually decided that I want to cut scales off of this carbon fiber block and then also utilize this quasi-isotropic carbon fiber in the build as well. Instead of seeing the normal pattern you see with carbon fiber most of the time on the sides of the handle, we're instead gonna use the end grain of the carbon fiber. It should give a really cool look to the handle and be a little bit more of a kind of subtle look, I believe. We're gonna make a frame that goes around the tang on the top and bottom of the handle. So what you'll see looking at the bottom view of the handle or the top view of the handle, this quasi-isotropic piece sandwiched by a piece of this on each side of it. First thing I need to do is decide how thick the 2 scales I cut off of this block are, mark them out, and then go bandsaw them off. I'm using the brand new vertical bandsaw Dad just put together. Made it from a small portable bandsaw, built a table for it, and made a mounting system and bolted it to the floor. It's actually really handy, and I think I'm gonna love it in the shop. I'm using a pretty worn out blade because the carbon fiber is actually really hard on the bandsaw blades. By the end of cutting the carbon fiber, this blade was actually so worn out that it was barely doing anything though, and I was actually having a really hard time finishing the cut. Next, I flatten the scales on the broadback a little bit. Then I move over to the disc sander to really get the pieces flat. I got our 2 frame pieces all cut out and shaped. I also lined up the top and bottom frame piece on one of the scales and drilled some holes through it. That way we can stick some little tiny lineup pins through there and locate these as we're epoxying them together. You might notice the other scale doesn't have any little holes in it. That's because it doesn't need it. I just needed these located, and we can do that on one scale, and then we'll pop the other scale right on top of here, and we don't need to really locate it besides just kind of lining up with the other scale. We're gonna epoxy everything together right now. I'm gonna use some G-Flex West System epoxy. We're also gonna rough all these surfaces up with a little bit of 80 grit sandpaper right before I epoxy everything together. I'll let the epoxy set up overnight, and then I shaped the ends of the handle. Something that I had to work on was I needed to thin my tang just a little bit so the tang would actually fit in the slot. Well, as it turns out, in a heartbeat, I accidentally took too much off and made it so my blade could wobble in the handle a little bit. I'm just not happy with how this is coming out. I want to get it really nice looking in there, since the customer is going to be able to take the handle apart and see the inside of the handle. Just not feeling the way this is looking so far. So I thought we'd try to pry the handle apart and see how well the epoxy is holding. Wow, I had to pry on that really hard. Wow, the epoxy held really, really well. It actually peeled layers of the carbon fiber off a little bit. Josh just came up with a brilliant idea that I think I'm gonna pursue. I was going to completely scrap these frame pieces and make them from scratch, but I think we can actually just leave these 2 on here and mill it down or sand it down so they're a little bit smaller, and then epoxy this piece back on. I can't believe how well that epoxy held, by the way. It literally ripped layers of the carbon fiber, like pieces fibers from the carbon fiber ripped off onto the pieces from the other side. I'm gonna clean up all these pieces and see how everything looks, and we'll think about putting these pieces back together without remaking the frame. I'm very happy with that. I was able to get the inside cleaned out very nicely. It looks like brand new in there. I might need to lightly sand this down now to get it exactly the same size as the tang, or rather about 2/1000ths of an inch thicker than the tang is what I want. I finally have it where I want. It fits up all the way where it needs to. I think we're ready to epoxy these. So I'm gonna mix up some more West System and get that bad boy put back on there and let it dry overnight. Let's let that cure overnight, and hopefully that'll still fit in the morning. Some things really fight you. This was one of those things. I think it's time for a well-deserved coffee break. Got a nice full cup here. That's good.
The next day.
I took all the clamps off. Let's see if the handle fits onto the blade nicely this time. Hopefully. Okay, so far so good. So far so good. Oh, it fits all the way to where it goes. I'm gonna put it all the way on there and then wiggle it side to side like this. That was how it was fitting a little loose before. Well, it was tight and then it was loose, then it was tight, then it was loose. Anyway, long story. Now it's perfect. The handle is finally fit. I am so excited that I get to finally move forward on this now.
I will see you in the next video. May the forge be with you. Bye-bye.